Hello everyone, I'm Bill Van Oss. I'm the rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Duluth, Minnesota, and I'm going to be reflecting on wilderness and the wilderness experience. And I'm going to begin with a reading from the Gospel of Mark in the first chapter. Mark chapter 1, beginning at verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." And the Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. Jesus' wilderness experience, 40 days in the wilderness after having been baptized and heard God's voice telling him that he was God's beloved, he goes out into the wilderness. Likely to ponder some of life's most important questions. Who am I? What does it mean to be God's beloved? There are lots of people talking about how what we're going through right now is a kind of wilderness experience. This pandemic, this physical distancing, all of the disruption and the changes that we're experiencing. They're framing it as a wilderness experience. Wilderness experiences are disorienting. We enter into unfamiliar territory. We don't know where we're going. It's confusing and scary. The great Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann wrote extensively on Israel's wilderness experience in the book of Exodus. Their experience in the wilderness after having been brought out of Egypt by Moses and passing through that wilderness place on their way to the promised land. They wander in that wilderness place. They're afraid. They question. They complain at one point to Moses, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt where we had plenty to eat to take us to this place where we don't have enough to eat and we don't have water to drink?" They make mistakes along the way. They create a golden calf to worship in their wilderness experience, because it's disorienting and confusing and difficult. One of the lessons that they learn along the way is that God is with them. And one of the things that I love about Israel's story at this point in their history is that God is with them wherever they pitch their tent. They're on the move. They're nomadic people. So they don't have a temple to worship in. They don't have a beautiful building to go to. But wherever they pitch their tent, God is with them. That's something important for us to remember in this kind of wilderness experience that we're in, where we're not able to worship in our beautiful building. We need to remember that God is with us wherever we pitch our tent, wherever we are. God comes to them in various ways during their time in the wilderness, the people Israel. God comes to them in manna and in quail and in water from the rock. Walter Brueggemann talks about this wilderness experience as a liminal place, a place of disorientation and ambiguity that leads to a new place. This liminal time in the wilderness leads to a new place, a new people. This liminal place is where God's people are shaped and formed and reformed. They are made new in this wilderness experience. It's a place, it's a time, it's an experience where people get to know God and themselves and others in new ways. The wilderness can change us for the better. We get to know God and ourselves and each other in new ways. And so we ask, what are the lessons we can learn during this wilderness time? What is this wilderness teaching us? How will this change us, this wilderness experience, this liminal space that we're in? How will it change us? Yvonne Abraham is a columnist with the Boston Globe. And back in March, she wrote a wonderful piece where she wondered if this pandemic could be the beginning of something extraordinary. This is Yvonne Abraham from the Boston Globe. She writes, "What would the world be like if the things that have become so important to us during this pandemic remained so? How would our lives look if our values and priorities were frozen right here? If we were always as kind to each other and as worried about the world as we are today? We would do just about everything differently. We would pay teachers, blessings upon them, as much as hedge funders. Our hands would always be clean so we could eat off them. We would have more respect and money for low-wage workers who deliver our basic needs, grocery store clerks, and others who work to bring food to our tables, drivers who keep bringing packages to the doors of the luckiest among us, trash haulers and maintenance workers and janitors and others who put themselves at risk to protect us. We would really see the folks who work in restaurants, most of them for lousy money, and insist that they earn wages that match their dignity. We would leave bigger tips. We would spend less money on things that serve no purpose except to signal status, care less about impressing strangers, make more of what we have last. We would waste less, period. We would spend more time with our family and friends and be more keenly aware of our massive good fortune to have them, especially the older ones. We would hug longer and linger in each other's presence. We would love our neighbor. Yup, even that one. We would work together to make those who are alone feel less so. We would be more grateful for all we have and more outraged at what others do not. We will be happier on the other side of this if we remember. That's Yvonne Abraham in the Boston Globe back in March. And I'm leaving it at if we remember, because it's up to us to fill in that blank. What do we need to be remembering during this wilderness time that we are in, when so much has changed, when there's so much disorientation and disruption, and we're in this liminal place. What is it that we need to remember? That God is with us? Who we are? What's important? That we are all connected? That we're part of a human family? Our call to love our neighbor as ourselves? Those are just some of the things I believe that we are being encouraged, compelled to remember during this wilderness time, during this disrupting time in our lives. Remembering that God is with us, remembering who we are, remembering what's important, remembering that we are all connected, and remembering our call by Jesus to love our neighbor as ourself. I pray for God's blessings for you during this wilderness time.